and your commitment to taking your role as a leader seriously. We Kentuckians are a people of indomitable spirit who, if given leadership with integrity and vision, can and will move to a higher place. We have the talent, we have the potential to make every community in Kentucky a place of opportunity, where our people aspire to excellence in their lives to equal the excellence we aspire to in the sports arena. We can do that. To meet the challenges ahead, we must all demand accountability, strength, and vision from all of our public leaders, from the bottom to the top. But each of you must offer them your strength and vision as well. I urge each of you to take your place in your communities and your state's leadership and commit yourself to do all that you can to make a difference in our future. Thank you very much.
I'm going to be so crass as to summarize what she just said in 4 lines. Personal ethics and accountability, fiscal responsibility, core education's core responsibility, public policy. Politics is not a spectator sport, it's a participatory game. And with that, we'll let her answer any questions you might have. Come on.
I should bet you somewhere that first week. Hey, John.
Actually, I was having a conversation with Ike last night about education.
You got my code microphone up.
I was talking to Ike last night about education, and one of the things I lived in Kentucky a short time is that it seems like in a lot of the counties, the largest employer is the school district. And what happens is that change comes slowly because people continue to work there, and you're not always getting people from outside, the best and the brightest to come in. And if you want to fundamentally change education at that level to get kids moving through the system and get them through college, what's the solution for that?
Well, you're referring to the quality, the caliber of those staff and faculty, the teachers.
It just seems that if it's the largest employer, you end up getting, and this isn't a Kentucky law, this is where I came from as well. You might not get the best candidate because you're going to be the job, or
Right.
those kinds of things. And it really happens a lot in the education system because it's
Right.
so many jobs and it's so big in so many of these counties.
Well, I think there's no question that especially in rural Kentucky counties, local school districts hold a lot of sway and have developed over time a lot of political clout because of the hiring process. I think there have been reforms that have helped that process, Ms. Kira, that have tried to make those efforts less parochial and more professional. I think the bigger challenge in those rural counties where we have a tradition of lack of educational attainment is a cultural problem, where there is a lack of appreciation for education. We have a lot of families who would prefer their kids not go on and get it out of high school or get a degree because they'll leave home. So I think that has to be one of our biggest challenges, is how do we wed an economic development strategy with an educational strategy, so that if in fact we are more successful in pushing more kids through the system and getting them a higher level of education, where are they going to work? And the areas where we need more education aren't necessarily the places that have the jobs to offer. And I don't think we've done a good enough job. Tony's heard me give a whole different speech I have about connecting the dots in public policy. We tend in Frankfurt to have these silos that operate. So we got the economic development cabinet over here trying to create jobs, and the education cabinet over here trying to get more folks educated, without a lot of interaction and a lot of strategic direction, and working with the private sector. All of those folks ought to be at the table together trying to figure out where can we create the jobs, how can we create the jobs, and how do we wed those jobs to parts of the state that desperately need economic growth. So I think we've got a cultural problem with trying to convince more Kentuckians that education actually is the lifeline to success. We're only a generation away in this state from where you could you could have a decent income for your family without a high school degree, by working in coal mines, working in agriculture, working in GE or Ford and Mobil. All those jobs are gone. And now the simplest jobs are required requiring technical skills, training, and education. So I think we've got to tackle the education issue on several fronts. But part of it is to convince more Kentuckians that education is that lifeline to success. And if they believe that, then there will be more public support when those issues are debated here. You know, when we make a decision here to cut higher education, it's a policy decision that we could just raise tuition. It's several months down the road when the result actually occurs, so there's a little separation between that decision being made and people understanding how it came about. But if people aren't speaking out to their legislators and to the governor and his people and the cabinets about what is important to them, then you're going to continue to see decisions made that have those types of implications. You asked me a simple question, I gave you a lecture. Anyone else? By the way, John is now in the League of Cities and doing an outstanding job with implementing a new direction for a very important organization in Kentucky, and kudos to you for all the great work.
So I wouldn't be here without you.
I'm sorry?
So I wouldn't be here without you.
You know, I didn't think about my work as a job creation strategy.
Chris, Tom Peter.
Sure, Mayor.
The pension issue. I was reading an article, I guess the day before it came down on Tuesday, and it was really critical of Kentucky. Last year it was only funded at 50%. I know there's been a lot of discussion between the House and the Senate trying to make some decisions. But as those decisions are made, things seem to get worse in the city government, county government trying to fund and the city government. So what's a good strategy for that?
Well, I think you've got two situations going on with pensions. One is a short-term crisis of how do we begin to fully fund the liability that exists today. And in 2008, the legislature did pass legislation that provides for increasing the state's contribution and ramping it back up to get back even with where we need to be to just fund what our current liabilities are. The broader long-term question is one that will continue to be debated here, and I expect it will be a major issue in the next session, and that is, should we move from a defined benefit to a defined contribution for the long term, which is done in many parts of the private sector. That has been a very contentious debate. And, you know, the pension issue is another one where until you can get people of opposing views to sit down together around the table and roll their sleeves up and try to find common ground about how to go forward, you can't fix it. We have, with that legislation that was passed in our way, begun now to at least bring ourselves back to a position that is more defensible in terms of our unfunded liability. But the only way we did that was take a lot of money away from other areas. I mean, this budget we recently passed, we had to move money over there to help fill that gap because the state has been underfunding its contributions for 12, 13 years. So as that happens, the hole gets bigger and bigger. Now we're trying to fill that hole back up again. But the bigger, longer-term policy issue, and I think we can actually make the system viable to take care of the current enrollees and the current liability over time if the commitment stays there. I think the bigger, long-term policy issue is this one: do we change the very fundamental basis of how that system works? And, you know, the other problem with local governments, as you well know, is the state could underfund its contribution and did so for a number of years when it needed the money for other things. So local governments didn't have that option. They're required by law to fully fund their employer contributions. So it's had an increasing negative effect on local governments. And I think that issue, as well as the structure of the benefit versus contribution, will be major issues in this next session. What else?
Craig, you talked about education. It seems to me historically Kentucky is sometimes at the forefront of education, and then things get good for a while, and we drop back, and then we fall back behind, and then, you know, this has happened several times. How do you sustain those kind of efforts over a longer period of time? How do you make a sustained systemic change to those kind of things where we stay at the forefront rather than getting all excited and launching